I never thought I'd hear the words, "Then don't be with me," and have them stick in my head like an echo I couldn't shake. Not from anyone, especially not from her. It was Thursday, late afternoon, and the bookstore was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of pages and the hum of the old heater. I was shelving new arrivals, mostly mystery novels and travel guides I wouldn't touch in a million years, when she walked in. That familiar soft click of her heels on the worn wood floor made me freeze. I had a habit of noticing things about her no one else would. How her coat always seemed perfectly tailored even after a long flight. The faint lavender perfume that lingered in her wake. The way her hair caught the sunlight through the window, just so. She glanced at me, smiled, but it wasn't the casual, polite smile you offer strangers. It was layered, like she knew I was noticing her noticing me, and for a split second, I thought maybe she liked it. I cleared my throat and offered her a stack of the new hardcover arrivals. She took them, brushing her fingers over mine by accident, or maybe on purpose. My heart jumped anyway. "I wasn't expecting anyone here," she said, flipping through a book with her sharp, deliberate fingers. She looked up at me, those eyes, hazel, warm, somehow both amused and serious, meeting mine like she had a question she wasn't ready to ask. I wanted to say something clever, something that wouldn't make me sound like I'd just dropped my coffee in my lap. But my mouth betrayed me. I just nodded. "Yeah, quiet today." She laughed softly, not at me, not mocking, just soft. Like she had somewhere better to be, but chose to stay anyway. There was a brief pause, too long for comfort, where we both pretended to look at the shelves, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. It was the kind of pause that leaves a pulse lingering, an electric hum in the air. Then, without warning, she put a hand on my shoulder. Just for a second. A little anchor in a world that was suddenly spinning too fast. I swallowed hard. "Are you happy?" she asked, and I didn't realize how low my voice had gotten until it sounded almost like a whisper. Not for her, I told myself, but for the question itself. I don't know," I said, not entirely lying. Her expression didn't soften the way I expected. Instead, there was a flicker of something, challenge? Honesty, that made my chest tighten. "Then don't be with me," she said. The words landed like stones in my stomach. Cold, clear, impossible. And yet, they weren't cruel. Not exactly. There was this strange, unshakable confidence in her delivery, like she knew exactly what she was saying and why. Like she'd already thought it through, and I wasn't supposed to argue. I nodded, not sure what else to do, and stepped back to let her pass. She lingered by the poetry section for a moment, flipping a page, and I caught her eye again. That tiny, quiet spark. I swear it hovered there longer than it should have, daring me to do something I didn't yet understand. After she left, the quiet of the bookstore felt heavier. I couldn't stop thinking about the weight of her hand on my shoulder, the way she looked at me like she could see straight through everything I thought I was hiding. The hum of the heater was background noise to the electricity I felt just standing there, pretending to reorganize books. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop thinking about it. It was another Thursday, though somehow it felt different. She needed help carrying boxes from the storeroom to the new display near the front of the bookstore. I volunteered without thinking, already anticipating the brush of her fingers as she adjusted the boxes, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the musty smell of old paper. She moved with that effortless control I envied, lifting heavier boxes than I would have dared. But there was a hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of exhaustion behind the practiced composure. I watched her pause, one hand on her hip, and the other brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I wanted to ask if she needed a break, but the words never made it past the tight knot in my throat. "You're careful," I said finally, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, and for a moment, her guard slipped. A tired half-smile curved her lips. "I have to be," she admitted. There was a softness in her tone, almost vulnerable, like a crack in the armor she carried so naturally. Then she straightened, pushed the boxes aside, and returned to her controlled, confident self, as if she hadn't just allowed herself to show a fraction of fatigue. I noticed the small details, the faint tremor in her fingers when she adjusted a corner of a box, The subtle crease in her forehead when she frowned at a mislabeled spine. The way her breath caught slightly when the stack wobbled for just a second. I couldn't stop cataloging them in my mind. She laughed at something a customer said, a low, soft sound that seemed out of place with her composed demeanor. I realized I could spend hours listening to it. The laugh was unguarded, warm, human, so different from the calculated confidence she usually exuded. I felt a pull, the kind of gentle tug at the edge of your chest you don't admit to yourself. At one point, she turned to slide a heavy box into place and caught me staring. For a second, her eyes flicked away, then back again, measuring, assessing. And though she tried to mask it, I thought I saw the tiniest spark of acknowledgement, a flicker of curiosity, or maybe something like recognition, that she felt the same strange tension I did. We paused, stacking the last of the boxes, and our hands brushed briefly. Not an accident, not clumsy, just a fleeting connection, lingering a heartbeat longer than it should have. She didn't pull away immediately, and neither did I. The quiet stretched between us, filled with things neither of us dared to say. When she finally stepped back, adjusting her coat as if she had done nothing at all, I caught a glimpse of fatigue in her eyes again. That vulnerability, so carefully hidden, made my chest tighten. And then she smiled, just a small, enigmatic smile, and turned away. I stayed still for a moment, watching her walk toward the counter, feeling the pull of something I couldn't name. It was in the brush of her sleeve against my arm, the way her gaze lingered slightly too long, the quiet that fell after she moved. That small, charged moment. It clung to me, unrelenting, and I couldn't stop thinking about it long after she disappeared from my sight. The storm had started without warning, rain slashing against the large bookstore windows like it had a vendetta. I was stacking returned books near the back, and she was sorting invoices at the counter, the dim desk lamp casting a halo around her hair. The room smelled faintly of wet leather and paper, comforting and claustrophobic all at once. She looked up at me and smiled, just slightly, like she was letting me in on something private, but not telling me what. I caught the tiny lift of her brow, the way her fingers lingered over a pen longer than necessary, and felt that familiar tug at my chest. I wanted to ask her why she smiled like that, but words seemed too clumsy. "You should probably close the shutters," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as the wind rattled the glass. She paused, considering, and then came around the counter, brushing past me to reach the window latches. For a second, our shoulders touched, just lightly, but long enough to send a current through me. She didn't step back, and neither did I. The silence stretched, thick and impossible. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" I asked softly, more to the air between us than her face. Her hand stilled. She looked at me with that layered expression I could never fully read. Confident, guarded, and yet a little exposed. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "Pretending what?" she asked, but her voice wavered just a fraction, betraying the careful control she always maintained. I wanted to reach for her hand, to touch, to just let her know I understood without speaking another word. But then, of course, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, her whole posture stiffening as she answered. The name flashed on the screen, someone from the past, no doubt, and the bubble we were in popped instantly. I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself to step back. My chest ached, not just from proximity denied, but from the sheer tension of what nearly slipped into words, or action, between us. She laughed softly into the phone, the warmth disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The storm outside intensified, rain pelting the roof, wind howling through the slightly ajar back door. I stacked the last few books and forced myself to look away, knowing that if I met her eyes again, I might do something reckless. As she hung up and turned back toward me, the dim light caught the curve of her smile, fleeting but undeniable. She brushed past me again, almost close enough that our arms grazed. I felt my heart spike, and for a heartbeat, I thought I might reach out, might bridge the invisible distance that had grown between us over the past weeks. But I didn't. I just let the moment hang there, suspended, a breath too long. And even as I stepped back to continue my work, the memory of her shoulder against mine, the brush of her hand, and that fleeting, impossible smile. Everything about that near contact clung to me, and I knew I would be replaying it all night. The bookstore was empty that evening, the last customer gone, the bell above the door silent for the first time all day. I found her leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a spot on the worn wood, as if she could see through it. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. It was the kind of silence that carries the weight of unsaid things. I cleared my throat. We can't keep doing this, can we? My voice sounded small in the cavern of the store. She didn't look at me. Her fingers traced the edge of a book, back and forth, almost mechanically. Doing what? She asked softly. Not teasing, not brushing me off, just measured. I stepped closer, slow, careful, aware of every inch between us. This, I said, gesturing vaguely, at the tension, at the near touches, at the charged pauses that had become our language. Pretending it's normal, that we're just coworkers, that nothing's happening. Her gaze finally lifted. It met mine, but she didn't flinch or look away. There was a storm in her eyes, quiet, contained, dangerous only because it was deliberate. I don't know what's happening, she admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. And I'm not sure I want to. I swallowed. The confession hit harder than I expected. I wanted to reach out, to close the space, to say something that would fix the confusion buzzing between us. But I stayed still. My hands clenched at my sides. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out. You're scared, I said softly, more statement than question. She shrugged. The movement was so slight I almost missed it. Of course I am. I'm tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of wanting something I can't name. And I can't let it destroy whatever we already have. I wanted to argue, to insist that whatever we had didn't matter compared to the pull between us. But her words, measured and careful, had rooted me to the spot. She was right. There was a line we hadn't crossed yet, and maybe it was too late to step back. We didn't speak for a long time. I noticed her hand again, resting on the counter, fingers flexing slightly, as if she were deciding whether to move or stay. I noticed the slight tremor in her lips when she exhaled, the way the dim light made her hair glow just enough to blur the edges of her carefully curated composure. Finally, she straightened, meeting my eyes fully. There was no challenge now, no teasing, no barrier. Just honesty, the kind that leaves you raw. I don't know if I can do this, she said, voice cracking in a way that made my heart lurch. I don't know if I want to. But I do know. Her gaze faltered, a fraction of hesitation, and then she shook her head. I don't know anything anymore. And I'm terrified. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than any touch could have been. I wanted to answer, to offer reassurance, but the truth was, I had no answers. Just a heart thundering in my chest, 1,000 unspoken questions, and the awful, beautiful weight of her vulnerability pressed against me like gravity. I realized, in that moment, that nothing would ever feel normal again. It started with a voicemail. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but the store phone rang while I was shelving late returns, and the display board blocked my view of the screen. The name flashed, familiar yet distant. Her ex, the one she rarely mentioned. She appeared behind me, catching the screen too late to stop me from glancing. Her face tightened, a fraction, almost imperceptible. She pressed her lips together, jaw working as if chewing over words she couldn't say aloud. I wanted to look away, pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't, not with the tension already thrumming between us. I don't usually, she started, voice low, hesitant, almost afraid. She paused, as if weighing whether confession would ruin everything. I've been hurt before, really hurt. And it left things I don't think I'll ever fully fix. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, not yet. Instead, I watched the small tremble in her hands as she fiddled with a stack of postcards on the counter. The fluorescent light caught her eyes, glimmering faintly with something that wasn't just sadness. It was memory, sharp and precise. I thought I could start over, she whispered finally, almost to herself. And I thought I could be careful this time, avoid making the same mistakes. Her eyes met mine, quick and searching, as if she needed me to understand her without a single word spelling it out. Something inside me shifted. I remembered the photo she once showed me, tucked between the pages of an old art book. The man who had left scars, the quiet grief she carried behind laughter and poise. I wanted to say that loss doesn't have to define her, that the weight of the past can coexist with something new. But the words stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, I stepped closer, careful, not touching, just presence. "You're allowed to want," I said finally. My voice sounded softer than intended, but it carried weight. "Even if it scares you." She blinked, surprised by my words, and her shoulders relaxed fractionally. She exhaled slowly, the smallest crack forming in her controlled exterior. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse into honesty, like all the barriers she'd carefully erected were crumbling at the edges. I noticed her hand hover near mine, fingertips twitching as if to reach, but she pulled back. Just a hair, just enough to maintain the space. Yet the unspoken question hung heavier than any action. Then she turned slightly, her gaze lingering on the phone, on the memory, on the fragment of her heartbreak she'd exposed. She didn't say anything else, and neither did I. But the quiet was thick, saturated with revelation, and I felt it in my chest like a shift in gravity. I left her standing there, leaning lightly against the counter, eyes distant but focused, and walked to the window. The rain outside was still falling, tapping a rhythm against the glass, mirroring the tremor I felt in my own chest. And in that silence, I realized she had just let me see the parts of her she usually hid, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not her pain, not her restraint, not the way she was beginning to trust me without saying a word. It was subtle, quiet, but seismic, and I was already spinning under the pull of it. The bookstore smelled of old paper and rain-soaked streets outside. We'd stayed past closing, neither of us moving to lock the door, as if the outside world could wait while we sorted the chaos we'd been carrying silently. She was perched on the edge of the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes focused on nothing in particular. I was on the floor, stacking a pile of returned books, but my attention kept drifting to the curve of her shoulder, the small movements of her fingers as she idly brushed dust from the counter, the faint crease forming between her brows when she thought I wasn't looking. "Funny," she said finally, voice soft, almost lost in the hum of the heater. "How things sneak up on you." I paused mid-stack, unsure what she meant. She tilted her head, catching my gaze without shame, without pretense. I thought I could keep myself separate from this. She gestured vaguely between us, from feelings I didn't even want to have. I didn't answer. Words felt clumsy, insufficient. Instead, I walked over slowly, careful not to startle her. I perched on the edge of the counter beside her, leaving the smallest space between us. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd said and not said, of the tension that had threaded through weeks of proximity, near touches, stolen glances, and shared vulnerability. She sighed, a gentle, weary sound that made my chest ache. "I don't know if I've ever let anyone see me like this," she admitted, eyes tracing the edge of the counter. "And yet, here you are." I wanted to say something monumental, something that would sweep away all her hesitation. But the truth didn't need grand gestures. Not now. I reached out slowly, letting my fingers brush hers. Not a handhold, not a grab, just a touch that lingered, enough to say, "I understand. I'm here." Her hand stayed there. She didn't pull back. The smallest exhale escaped her, and I felt the tension between us fold gently into something quieter, inevitable, something earned through all the missteps, the hesitations, the stormy silences. We didn't need words. Not really. We just sat there, side by side, sharing space in a way that felt intimate because it had been earned slowly, painfully, deliberately. The rain tapped a rhythm on the windows. The heater hummed quietly, and the bookstore, our little world, was still, holding us together without forcing anything. She leaned slightly, just the tiniest fraction, her forehead almost brushing mine. My heart skipped, and I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the honesty in the silence. The truth between us was simple, clear, and terrifying in its inevitability. We couldn't undo what had been drawn between us, the pull that had grown over months of careful observation and restrained yearning. Her fingers twitched under mine. I didn't move. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. And then she leaned back, exhaling softly, eyes meeting mine with that layered, confident gaze she carried even in her moments of vulnerability. I smiled, small, unspoken, enough to carry the weight of everything. And she returned it with the same quiet understanding. We stayed like that for a long time, together yet separate, connected yet unspoken. The world outside existed, but in here, everything that mattered had already been acknowledged. The rain slowed. The bookstore smelled of paper and quiet. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt complete. I still remember that night like it's pressed into my skin. The quiet of the bookstore, the rain tapping against the windows, the faint hum of the heater, and the way she leaned into the space beside me without a word. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was just presence. And somehow, that made all the difference. Months have passed since then. Things aren't perfect. They're never perfect. But they are ours. I've learned that love doesn't always arrive with clarity or ease. Sometimes it sneaks in through small touches, shared silences, and the patience to notice the tiny, almost imperceptible ways someone carries their heart. She's changed, too. Not in some miraculous transformation, but in subtle shifts. I see her pause less, exhale more, let herself rest in the moment without fearing what comes next. She smiles more freely now, a smile that's hers and not just a shield for the world. And I've noticed the way she looks at me, not with expectation or caution, but with a quiet acknowledgement that we've earned whatever this is together. I don't think either of us knew how much we'd needed the other. I certainly didn't. I thought I was learning from her, watching, noticing, holding myself back. But I see now that she was watching, too, letting me in slowly, teaching me that love isn't always a storm. It can be a quiet, steady pull that changes everything without announcing itself. I remember the first time we touched hands in that slow, unspoken acknowledgement. I still think about the way her fingers fit against mine, tentative but deliberate. I still feel that pull sometimes, years later. And I think that's the thing. Love isn't always about dramatic confessions. Sometimes it's about understanding someone enough to let them be, to sit together in silence, and to know that silence itself is enough. I don't know what the future holds. I don't need to. What matters is the here and now, the way she laughs without pretense, the way we can share a look and understand without speaking, the way we've learned that closeness doesn't always need words. And so I sit here, thinking back to that first touch, that first look, that first silence that said more than any words ever could. It's quiet, imperfect, human, and it's ours. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?